Okay. So go ahead and call the Johnston City Council work session number 22-02 to order. City roll call, please.
Councilmember Coe,
Here.
Martin,
Here.
Reddy,
Here.
Burkhart,
Here.
Evans.
First item that we have on the agenda tonight is the police department budget presentation. Welcome back, Chief McDaniel.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be back with you all. Appreciate all the support in my absence. As you all know, we have an exceptional staff in the police department, and Lieutenant Tompkins and the other lieutenants and many others have stepped up in a major way over these last couple months, and it's really made my job in the healing process easy. So thank you. I know that we're very pressed for time tonight as far as discussion goes, and that normally this discussion would have happened earlier in the budget process, but tonight I really just want to give you as quick a snapshot as possible as I can on the decision package pieces that relate to the personnel side of things. So with the decision package that's attached to the work session agenda, if you look at that at your leisure, there's a lot of line items that have notes and things in there. I put a lot of information in there that tracks that annually. So Councilmember Burkhart, this is the first time you've seen some of this stuff. If you have questions about what's in line items, I try to dictate out a lot of that detail. We can obviously take a deeper dive if you have questions on something.
Thank you, Chief.
With the decision packages, there were 3 that were submitted. You've already had a discussion about the K-9 program that happened at the budget work session. My understanding is that went really well. If there's anything that we need to address on that, I'm happy to try to offer perspective. The piece that I really want to focus in, though, again, is on the personnel. So again, for those of you that have been on the council for a while, this spread or the organizational chart that's up, you've seen this every year. This is one of the things that I submit every year in the decision package process. It shows kind of where we're at right now in the staffing element and where we're trying to get to. So in the police department, we have 3 key roles that are going to be retiring in about the next 14 months. I believe, as you're all aware, Lieutenant Tompkins is going to be stepping away from the police department here at the end of this month. So we've built a strong contingency for that and bringing in Travis Overson as an interim commander for the next year. Tyler and Travis have been working through a lot of those transitional elements, and the interim commander is going to work a lot on strategic planning, specifically for the support services division that Lieutenant Tompkins has led for the last 5+ years. That upper left-hand corner is the lieutenant's position. Lieutenant Tompkins, right below that is a community service officer. This is a position that was initiated about 10 years ago. Terry Dippold is the person that holds that. He's a retired Urbandale police officer. He's got about 40 years law enforcement experience. He's going to be retiring likely in the spring of next year, next fiscal 23 budget year. So in looking at that, again, with the planning and strategic efforts we're trying to make in support services, we're going to re-envision that position and figure out how do we update the technology aspects of what we do in investigations and what roles and responsibilities should that take on. If you look at the center column, that's the administrative division within the police department. That's one that we've been building steadily since my time here. And that position down at the bottom is an administrative services officer. So that's one of the key points of a decision package that's been submitted this year, is taking what is right now a sworn officer's position and transitioning that to a civilian expert position. So what we've done over the course of time in Johnston, as many communities do, is as technology grew in the community and in the police department, someone who dabbled in it part-time and kept everything going, that became a full-time position. Then when we added the public safety building, all the facilities management components of that really blossomed and required a lot more time. In these last couple of years, Chief Clark and I have talked about really the shared responsibilities. There's a lot of overlap between police and fire when it comes to some of those technologies and managing that. So what we've envisioned is to take what is right now a sworn officer's position and recoup that on the side of patrol, the uniformed officers that are on the street. We need more patrol officers. So if we can keep that sworn position, move it over to patrol, then we're bolstering the patrol staffing by 1, and then we go out and we hire and we recruit for a position that's more specifically dedicated to the needs of the position in administrative services now, fleet facilities, IT, network, and it's a shared position between police and fire. So it's a 50-50 split. So that's the context of what that position is. We're working with the compensation consultant. I'm looking at Cindy. I don't think we've got that information back yet. So we've sent it out. We've done a job description for it. We've sent it out. Believe it will be a salaried position. Believe it'll probably be very comparative to what that senior patrol officer is making right now. I don't think we're going to save any money with that because it's such a technical position, but I think it should be very comparative to where we're at right now with the funding of that. So we'll get that back from the compensation consultant and have harder numbers, but I would imagine probably 75 to 80,000 of that salary point, and that's pretty close to what that officer, a senior officer, makes in this organization with overtime. So any
It
questions
would be
on that?
shared between the departments.
Right, yes, it'll be, right now it's a 75-25 split, and then the goal would be to take it to a true 50-50 split, because currently with that sworn officer right now, there's times where we pull him back to patrol to serve patrol needs. With this new person, it would be a straight civilian role, and it'd be 50-50 in those elements to serve all the department, both departments, I guess. Questions on that piece of it? Okay. Nope, go back up, Cindy. So the right-hand column, that's the patrol staffing side. Can you scroll up just a hair more so we can see the bottom? There you go. So on the right, we have 3 watches or 3 shifts. What we're trying to do on the patrol side is get to 7 officers assigned to each division. So the other decision package that I asked for was for an additional patrol officer's position. So right now, our afternoon watch, we have 7 officers when we're at full staff. If we take the sworn position that was in that administrative services, we're going to push that over to the night shift. So then that shift would have 7 at full staff. So then adding this other position would be for the day shift. Now, it's my understanding that's not probably going to work this year, just with tax rates and won't be recommended here when you get into your bigger discussion. It's okay. What I'm asking for is that we use a tactic that we've utilized a couple years ago when staffing the police department, is that you're going to fund a certain number of full-time positions that are sworn. What I'm going to ask you to consider is to authorize me to hire 1 additional beyond. So right now we have 32 sworn. So we want to keep that 32 sworn, but I would like authorization to hire a 33rd without adding any additional funds to that. And the reason that we can do that is that we have a school resource officer that's is going to be deployed. He's got 400-day orders for military deployment. So he is going to come off of our payroll entirely the first part of May. He's going to have a 400-day deployment. On top of that, he has up to another 90 days beyond that of reintegration time. So we could be looking at a year and a half or longer without that position, but it would hold a spot within our ranks. So if we take the funds that we would be using for that position and hire someone new, now we're not losing as much in that translation. Now, it could potentially be viewed as, okay, we're taking on an additional position then in future budget years, and that's something worth discussion. But the other option we have is at the end of the 2022 calendar year, once the contract for the interim services commander is done, we're going to have to hire another officer. So at that point in time, we can reevaluate, and if there's not a desire in the next budget year to support that position, then we don't lose anything from a dollars and cents value. It's all there. There's no new money added. There's no long-term commitment. Basically, what you would do is you'd allow me to hire a person off of our existing list in May-ish. Hopefully, it's a lateral in-state candidate. We can use May, June, July to get that person trained up through our field training program. And come August, when we would have to take someone from patrol and put it in that SRO position, because we have to fill that based on the 28E, now we're not shorting patrol, and we're able to put that position in to that patrol spot. We're not gaining anything in the grand scheme of trying to have 7 per shift unless you want to make a longer term commitment to it. But it's a stopgap over the course of time in the next probably year and a half. A lot at you. Any questions?
When does this term start? This person is going out for
Military leave?
Yes, the military thing. When is
So
it?
I don't have an exact date for you. His orders, he has to report, I believe, in mid-April, so he'll probably be leaving the first part of April.
This year?
Yes, just a couple months away.
Oh,
And so it's a situation that he has so much time to get spun up before he goes on his deployment. He's going to be gone for a couple of weeks here for pre-deployment activities too. So it's already kind of started, but by mid-April at the absolute latest, he's gone for at least 400 days and could be up to 490 days.
But Chief, you would be looking for, obviously you'd prefer us to authorize you hiring this 33rd officer. But as a fallback, it would be that you would be authorized to have 32 sworn officers, but also authorized to hire a 33rd. Is that the right terminology?
Right, yep. So if you're, right now, as this org chart sits today, we have 32 sworn and 5 civilian. So what we're asking for with the public safety support position would be 32 and 6. So then this other question becomes, do we go 33 and 6, or do we stay 32 and 6 and then just fill the gap?
Chief, do we need to authorize that 33rd hire in this fiscal year based on that timing you've discussed, since you kind of walked through that?
That'd be a question for the attorneys. Probably what we've done in past years as part of that final resolution that adopts the budget is when the authorization comes, but that's a great question. I'd have to ask our attorney as far as what the perspective is. I would like to hire off of our existing list that we've developed. We've still got a couple more people that potentially, hopefully, they're not going to get hired by other agencies. Ideal to do it in May once the funds became available.
Sure.
Stop right there and move on with the discussion unless there's more questions that you have.
Any other questions?
Obviously, this is something we can circle back on to if you have more questions that come to mind. I know I'm throwing a lot
I
at
have
you.
a question here, sorry, Chief. It's a different question, not the one you're talking about right here. So I was looking at this line items and expenditures and things like that. There was this expenditures for overtime. Overtime,
Overtime?
yes.
Yep.
And I see that's, I think, something like 294 something, is that right?
Yeah, I don't have that in front of me at the
Yes.
moment, but I can give you a baseline.
I'm looking at it. It's 293,748.
Sure. Councilman Reddy, what page are you on? Could you help us?
Page 4.
Page 4? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I've got a separate sheet that I use to calculate all that stuff. There's a formula that I use.
My question is that, I know you're paying a lot of overtime, and overtime is like 1.5 times the salary, right?
Most of it, we have 5 holidays, three holidays a year that I think is double time. It comes out of that as well
Okay,
by contract.
okay. This is a different, this is a question that we are spending so much money on the overtime. Could it be prudent to just hire one person to fill that position, and will that work?
Unfortunately not. That's the challenge in a 24-hour operation is it's never a 1-for-1 split.
Right.
We're looking at adding between 3 and 6 full-time positions to cover one spot. That would be in that daily rotation, 365 days a year. So the overtime, the way it's calculated, and I'm going to shoot from the hip because I can't find the sheet at the moment, but I believe it's 6 hours per sworn officer per pay period is what we calculate. And that's court time, that's work time for late calls or being called in early. That's also anything related to special events. We're hosting more special events, so we have to up staff for that. We do added bike patrol in the summertime on our trails. There's a lot of different programs and elements that we have to post overtime for that you couldn't hire one person and get the same level of efficiency as posting 20 hours of overtime that month to have existing officers ride the trails and work through the community outreach aspects of what we do. I can get you an exact breakdown. I have it, I just don't have
Yeah,
it in my
I'm just
file.
curious about that. I know you spend a lot of money on overtime in itself. My thinking goes that, why couldn't we just hire one more with that amount of money that we spend for overtime? So,
Yeah, I wish it were that simple. I wish I could just take that money and do it because it'd be a whole lot easier sell. But we would just, the court time and all the other elements of the things that we do on a day-to-day basis, if we had more staff, we wouldn't need as much overtime. But we're in a position where we're trying to staff 3 officers all the time. So sometimes we have to post to backfill patrol shifts. We also run into, when we have military deployments, when we have injuries, when we have continuing education, when we have pregnancies, those sorts of things all require us to post overtime to backfill. And
okay,
there's always a shuffle that's going on.
fair enough. Thanks for the explanation.
Chief, may I ask one more question? On your canine decision package, there was a memo, and it may have been provided to us before. The premise of the canine is still intended to be explosive detection as part of its training. Is that correct?
Yes, that's been our intent, unless there's been some other discussion I'm unaware of. If you're asking for background, I can give you background, but the simple answer is yes, that's the intent.
The only reason I asked that question, there was the memo on page 30, and in parentheses of each one of the trainings for a canine, where it says multipurpose and then CWK9, in each one it says NARC, N-A-R-C in parentheses. I didn't know if that was the designation for narcotics detection or if that's something else entirely. So
I would guess that is probably what it is, but it would be the same thing for the explosive ordinance.
Okay.
That at the time when we initially solicited the bid from the vendor, I think the discussion was looking at a narcotics detection dog until we did a site visit and worked through how he does the explosive detection training and understood this is a much better option for our community.
okay, thank you for that clarification.
Anything else, Chief?
But if you're good.
Anything else, council?
All right, thank you,
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thanks, Chief.
The next item on the agenda is to review and discuss the proposed FY23 budget.
I'm going to start us out this evening by going through the memo that was provided to the City Council that provides a lot of the background and detail for the FY23 budget. I'm also going to talk about the decision packages, and then Teresa's going to talk about put it all together as far as where we are and what the staff recommendation is. So I know we provided an 18-page memo, very long memo, but there's a lot of detail in there that we think is important for the City Council to consider as we put our budget together. I do want to express my appreciation to our department heads that start the budget process by determining what they need for their operations, as well as identifying decision packages that will enable them to continue to provide the service that we do and actually expand on the service. And we all know we have a growing community. So what we look like last year is different this year. It'll be different next year as we continue to grow as a community. So if we could start on page 1 of the memo that we provided, just about halfway down. Do you have the memo up, Cindy? There you go. Oh, is that the decision package memo? Can you go to the start of this one? There you go. So on page 1, we begin the discussion, or at least reminding the City Council that a lot of what we do and how we prepare our budget, you're right there, Cindy, thank you. We talk about our community survey and our city goals. And one thing is, as staff looks and builds our budget, we are reminded of the information from our survey that our citizens are saying that is important to them, as well as the City Council through the goal-setting process. And so if you look at middle of page 1 from the survey, what we hear from our citizens, overall flow of traffic and overall quality of recreation programs are important. And I think you'll see in our budget presentation, or what's being proposed to the council, we have a decision package to address these, as well as are continuing to work on projects such as for the recreation side. We have the Ignite project. For the traffic flow side, we just got notification that we received a grant from the state of Iowa to help us make sure that our traffic signals are timed and making traffic flow as efficiently as possible. So we continue to do those types of things to make sure we meet those goals. And then also our survey identified that maintenance of sidewalks and city streets are important. And again, in our capital improvements program, as well as decision packages, we have some items to address those issues. So I also provided, we also provided on page 1, when I say we, Teresa and I work on this memo and the information, but we go through the priorities that were established by the city council during the goal-setting process. And then we also provide some information on growth on page 2 and the top of page 3 of our community, where we talk about how many new residents we have, how many businesses have developed within the city within the last year. And then we also talk on page 3, we talk about the characteristics in our community. We have some uniqueness. We're not just a bedroom community because we have an influx of people that work in Johnston every day of the week. And so we also have to provide service, particularly emergency services to those individuals. And we also attract, with some of our businesses being Camp Dodge, Corteva, and Deere Financial, a lot of people that come to those businesses. And so we have an influx of people throughout the day, every week of the year. Moving on to page 5, just about halfway down the page, we talk about property valuations. And again, we try to provide you as much information as we can. And what this shows, as the council's aware, every other year is a reassessment year for Polk County and are setting the tax or the valuations of our property. And so the year that we're budgeting now is a reassessment year. So we have the advantage of having more value within our community. And you can see from that graph that's on the screen now, what on average the Polk County assessor has is the results of the reassessment. And as you can see, on average, residential properties increased in value by 7.5%, multi-residential properties 22%, and so you can go down the line there. The one class of property that did not increase is hotels, restaurants, health, recreation, bars, and theaters. They actually have gone down 30% in value, and that is a reflection of COVID and what's happened to those industries. So you can see those are all information that's very important for us to review as we put the budget together. If you move on to page 6, the top of page 6, we talk about the property tax rollback. And as we're aware, our property taxes, particularly on residential, we receive a rollback every year on what percentage of our property valuation we pay taxes on. In the current year, we pay taxes on 56.4% of the value of our properties. The state has calculated the rollback for the budget that we're currently working on, and that rollback is going to go to 54.1%, which means the value that you pay, your property tax bill is based on, is going down this next year, or it actually creates less value that the city can tax for. And so that's really the effect of the property tax rate going down. What it really means for Johnston is that just off the top, we're losing about $260,000 worth of revenue that if our valuations would have stayed the same, we wouldn't be losing that revenue. And so if you think about all the services you provide and the cost of those services, we're really sort of starting $260,000 in the hole just to stay where we currently are. And this, again, that in itself is not, what is the basis for everything we're going to talk about this evening, but is a factor. There's a lot of factors. There's a lot of moving pieces to this, but I just wanted to point that out because that is a pretty significant issue that we have to address as we work on the budget.
Jim, can I interrupt you just for a sec? I just want to make sure I understood what you said. If valuations had held steady, we would have been $260,000. Or does this 260 take into account those additions that have already?
The fact that it's gone down. So to get back to the same level, we'd have to tax $260,000 more.
If the rollback percentage had stayed the same.
But based on,
Excuse me, but conversely, because of our new valuation,
okay,
if rollback had stayed the same and not changed, because rollback changed, we lost $584,000
thank you.
Update the
with our
valuations.
updated valuation.
Okay.
And then also, as we've talked about, the commercial property tax backfill is being reduced by action of the state legislature last year. So over the next 5 years, we're going to lose about $100,000 per year of the backfill that we've received from the commercial property tax rollback. And so that, again, we have to make up, if we want to, continue at the level we are, we have to make up for that $100,000 each year for the next 5 years. Eventually, we will be $500,000 less in property taxes from commercial than we currently have. So those are all factors that we have to think about as we move through this. And we're aware that also the multi-residential is going down as well, as far as the rollback, and eventually it'll be at the same level as single-family homes. Going to page 7, if you look, we're sort of the middle of the page. We do give some historic information on several of the items that we talk about with our budget, and this is property tax levy calculation. It gives you a historic 10-year look back and where we currently are, and so you can see how we've been doing over the last 10 years related to debt service and property tax levy and those kinds of issues. Probably the big thing to point out when you look at bottom of page 7, 2019, 2020, where our debt service levy was $3.60 per thousand, and you can see where it went to $2.34 per thousand for 2 years, and it's actually going in the proposed budget to $2.33. That's where we're really showing the property tax relief that we're providing with our local option sales tax. And so you can see we've dropped that debt service levy over time, and we've pretty much held steady with the property tax levy, although we'll talk later about the 5-cent increase that's being proposed. Again, a lot of additional information. If you go to page 9, one thing that always amazes me when we have these presentations every year is what we're planning on accomplishing in the year coming up. This shows the capital improvements projects that we have proposed for the FY23 budget, and you can see it's a pretty extensive list of what we're planning to accomplish with, and this is included in the budget that's being presented to the City Council this evening. And then quite a few paragraphs of additional information. If you go to the middle of page 10, where we talk about the general fund reserve, we, and Teresa will get into more detail with this, but we strive to maintain a general fund reserve of 25%. The budget that's being presented to you this evening does have a general fund reserve of 25%. And we are using, I think, about 1.2 million, right, Teresa, of our general fund reserve to get to the property tax rate that's being presented. So every year we budget very conservatively as far as revenue and expense, and then usually we have a little bit more in reserve that we use, and then a lot of times we have that money to help us get that property tax rate down and still accomplish some of the things we want to do, particularly with our decision packages. In this particular budget, we're not using any general fund reserve for decision packages, and we'll get more detail in that, and Teresa will cover that issue. And then moving on to page 11, one of the bright spots that we have is that due to the new census, the road use tax amount is going to increase for the city because we have more population, and so we are going to have more money to spend on our roads. And so that's really a bright side of the budget information. If we go to the next page 12, and Teresa will get more into this, we talk about the local option sales and services tax, which will be used primarily for, or it's being recommended that we use that primarily for not only property tax reduction, property tax relief, but also for some decision packages. And we'll get into the detail of what we're proposing to use that for in the proposed budget. So we'll get back into more detail with that. As you look through page 13, 14, that is just really a lot of historic information. We give you historic information on water, sanitary sewer, and stormwater utility. So that just gives you some background there. And then moving on to page 15, there is one typo I noticed in here that I didn't catch when we went from when we got some information from Metro Waste Authority. On the garbage rates, it says that the garbage rates are increasing by 26% from 832 to 1050, and it's actually 30% going from 830 to 1073. excuse me, we have already talked about that with the city council, but we'll make that change in this document. If you look at the bottom of page 15, we talk about the request for outside organizations. And again, we'll have a recommendation based on that, but what we have in this shows what was requested.
Jim, I think there's
yes.
an error in
Okay.
the description of the Greater Des Moines Partnership. I think what we have included in the budget is 7,500.
Yeah, that's, we were going to talk about that in our recommendations.
Okay.
But we can do it right now. So one of the recommendations, and we've taken this various parts of the budget and actually the whole budget to the HR Finance Committee, and one of the recommendations is that we've been at the $5,590 level for the Great Des Moines Partnership for many, many years. And they've come every year and talk about all the things they're doing to try to promote and economic development in not only Johnston, but around the metro. So the recommendation is we do increase that from the current 5,590 to 7,500. We do have information that we are sort of on the low side when you look at the other communities in the metro, particularly communities of our size. Actually, they've been requesting 10,000 for several years here. So we decided to make an incremental change on that one and definitely not providing what they had requested. So that's one thing that, and we'll talk about that again, these with the recommendations. And that's really about all I wanted to talk about right now. With the budget, I do want to go into the decision packages and give you some background on that, and then we'll come back and Teresa will summarize the budget and the recommendations.
Jim, before you go further,
Mhm.
page 16, the dark thing, is that fiscal year 32 or 23?
Say that again.
Page 16,
Uh-huh.
the chart that you have up
Right.
there, the last one,
Mhm.
last column says fiscal year 32.
Should be 23. Thank you. We'll make that correction. Yes, it should be FY 23 on the bottom of that chart. So let's go to the decision package memo, which I think Cindy has brought up here. And there is about 5 pages of narrative, 6 pages, 5 1/4 pages of narrative. I'm not going to go through all that. That provides just a lot of background in how staff takes a look at the decision packages and makes the recommendations. We consider a lot of factors when we put this together, but I think the important part is if we go to the chart that is at the end of this document. And everybody's been on the council for, are you at the chart there, Cindy? Everybody's been on there you go. Nope. Yeah, decision packages. So everybody that's been on the council for a number of years are familiar with our decision package process. I know it's going to be foreign to Brian because he hasn't served through a budget time on in the city council yet, but basically every year we have our department heads request decision packages, or these are programs, positions, equipment, anything that they want to do that is above and beyond what's been presented for our operating budget. And they present these decision packages usually in December when they make their presentation to the city council at that special work session. And then what our process is after that is that we make a recommendation to the city council regarding the funding of decision packages. So we break the decision packages down into 4 categories. If you look at the top of the first category, there is personnel general fund. And really what this means is it's primarily personnel requests from our departments that are funded through general fund, which means typically property taxes. And so there were 9 requests this year. What's being proposed or recommended by staff is to fund the top 7 requests. And I'll just give a real brief overview of what that really means. So the first request is a firefighter, and we all know that we need to continue to build our fire, particularly public safety, fire and police positions. But so the number 1 priority was a firefighter. The second priority was a parks position. We know that, and this is actually just for half a year. We don't really need the position. It's a recreation position, so we don't really need it in the first part of FY22 from July to December, but we're expecting in early 2023 for Ignite to open. And so we have a lot of recreation needs and planning and programs planned for, particularly when Ignite is open, but we also still need to address, what's happening at Crown Point and other facilities that we utilize. So it's important for us to start building that recreation component, and that's something we hear from our citizens. If you recall, that was one of the top ideas from our survey that people are interested in. And then the next item is the Economic Development Project Manager, and I don't have to tell you how busy Adam has been with everything that we have going on, particularly the town center, the Merle Hay Road Gateway, the Northwest Annexation, and just everything else that Adam is involved in. And so this is proposed to be a second position with our economic development. The good news about this is we do have a different funding source. We're able to pay with this through tax increment financing, which is how we finance Adam's position as well. So it doesn't have a tax impact, but it will have a significant impact in the growth of our economy, our businesses in the future. So anyway, that's one that we are recommending being funded without the use of property taxes. The next one, Chief McDaniel just described what he's planning on doing. He's going to use the sworn officer position to replace the support person that is currently in place, which we have it set up as that being a sworn position. So we are going to get one other officer on the street, and that I think that's the important part of that. As the chief mentioned, this position that's being shown here is going to be a civilian position split between the fire and police, and so this position will be split between both. Even though it's split between both, it still is general fund, so it still has to be funded through our general fund. But so you can see we have a police portion and a fire portion shown on this particular request, and so that's how we're dealing with that. The next items 5 and 6, we have actually 5, 6, those are 2 library requests, and what that relates to is we have a position, and just with the growth of use of the library, and we hear from the library president every year about how much more utilized our library is. And so the first item is expanding one of our part-time people to a full-time position. And then the second one is doing some pay adjustments, some market adjustments for our part-time employees, which we're all aware of the difficulty sometimes we're having today in business to attract qualified and folks, and we need to make sure we're competitive in our wages. And then the final one being proposed is a maintenance position for the Parks Department, and we have had significant growth in our Park Department, but yet I think in the last 6 years or so we haven't expanded the number of people that we have that are maintaining our parks. We'll have a new park with Ignite. We've added City Hall, the town center area, and a lot of trail expansion as well. So again, building up our staff to be able to maintain our park and trail facilities. And then so at this point in time, we're not recommending that the additional police officer and firefighter that have been requested are going to be funded. But again, we are getting a police officer and a firefighter in what's being proposed, but we're not proposing technically what would be the second positions that are being requested. Yes.
Jim, the fire portion of the public safety support specialist, is that 44,746 the entire amount that fire would contribute, or just the Johnston component of fire? In other words, will we receive or bill back anything to Grimes for that 44,000?
I don't think that was the intent. That would be a position internal to Johnston, correct? Right.
Would they help support Grimes computers and technology?
No, not at this time. Grimes just hired their own IT director to support all their IT needs.
All right.
I do have a question kind of related to the other firefighter position. So in the document, it talks about the idea of hiring 3 firefighters, 2 from Johnston, 1 from Grimes. We're funding 1 of the 2 Johnston. Do we expect Grimes will fund their position?
guess I should come up to the front so you can all hear me better. Yeah, at this time, we're anticipating that, but Grimes is a little bit behind Johnston as far as the budget process. The hope is that I think the next council meeting or the first one in February, that they will have those discussions.
Okay. So you would end up with 2 of the 3 positions being filled as a
Yes.
result of this. Okay. Great, thanks.
Okay, moving down to the next section of decision packages, and this is the decision packages that we talk about being equipment and services that we fund, again, from the general fund. Many of these are one-time expenditures. Some of them are, we'll point that out, but when we talk about the other ones, they're usually ongoing expenditures, because when you hire a firefighter, you're going to be paying for that person ongoing. So when we look at the second group here, there was 11 requests. Staff is recommending that we fund 10 of those requests. And I'll just go quickly down some of the justification there. When you look at items 1, 2, 4, and 5, those are all related to investing in our current staff. And we talk about paramedic school, that would be increasing the skills of one of our staff members to provide better service to our community. The proactive check-in is the mental part of mental health for our employees that have very stressful situations that they deal with. The Certified Public Communicator Program is improving the capabilities of our communications, one of our communications staff, and then also expanding the training for our communication budget as well, and that's shown here. So that's where those 4 really I felt was important as far as priority, because they are investing in our current staff. The 5th one there, which is item 3, and we've talked about the K-9 program, there appears to be a lot of support for the K-9 program, and the police department has committed to doing fundraising for that as well. And so that, even though it is a very, very significant amount of money, $116,000, they're through some grants, applying for grants and some fundraising. We anticipate having a majority of that money, the money raised for that particular expense. If you go down to item 6, we talked about the emerald ash borer. We've made a lot of progress with that. And we always look at this as we've been looking at this as more of a one-time expenditure. In the current budget, we've got $90,000 budgeted. This is $40,000. The anticipation, if we get through this year and make more progress on the emerald ash borer, the next year's request probably will be around $20,000 or so is what we're anticipating. We're hopefully getting to the end of that emergency need that we had. Item 7 is a compensation study. We did our previous compensation study about 12 years ago, and this is something we have used as we have throughout the years in justifying and making sure that we pay competitive wages to our employees. And this is really just looking at it again. This impacts all across all departments, so you can see part of it's paid for with water and sewer, as well as some of it with the general fund tax levy. And then the next item, administration, that's the Encode version, going from version 9 to version 10. We're currently on a 2007 version of our financial software, and this gets us up to the latest that's offered by the company that we use. So you can imagine how many changes have been made since 2007 when it comes to financial ability and that kind of thing. And then the next item is a joint purchase with several communities of a super vac fan. So this $18,000, it's actually $185,000 is the cost of the fan, but this $18,500 would be our share in doing a cost share with several other communities. It's a piece of equipment that's important when you're fighting a large structure fire, but it will be used by different communities for those purposes. And there is also some grant writing that's being done as well. So the 18.5 may actually come down as if grant money are made available. And then the last one that is recommended for funding is the recreation registration software. Again, as we get more into recreation, we need the ability to track who's signing up, keep track of the financial side of it. One thing that was discovered since the last time you saw this and was presented to you is that we are able to do that with our software, our existing software. So we're able to save about $10,000 or $12,000 on what was initially shown to you because we're able to take advantage of what we have. So that number has changed significantly. The one that we didn't offer at this point in time is a priority-based budgeting. We're not proposing that. It's something I think we need to keep looking at in the future, but really in light of everything going on, it wasn't really seen as a priority among our administrative staff as well as the HR Finance Committee at this point in time, and we'll continue to talk about that in the future. So the bottom line with everything that you've seen here and what's being proposed, and again, Teresa will get into more detail, is to fund all these items with utilizing a local option sales tax. Some of these are one-time expenditures, some of them are ongoing, but it is a method. That's the money that we really have available to us to do this, and we do have the funding available to accomplish everything that we've discussed here with the local option sales tax. And again, Teresa will get into more of the detail on the spreadsheet on how that fund is doing. If you turn to the last page, there's a couple more that I want to mention. So there's a request for a water sewer position. And these ones on the last page are personnel and equipment services that we can fund from sources other than property taxes. And so we have one request for a position, which is a GIS specialist, and an asset manager, which is our public works has grown significantly as far as assets, and we need to have somebody dedicated to making sure that we to track our assets, plus make sure we do the preventative maintenance things that we need to do to make sure that that all works. And so we're recommending that be approved. That would be paid for through road use tax, water, and wastewater. And then there's three equipment requests. One of them, the first one, pavement management study. Again, that is actually the first two, pavement management study and traffic flow improvement. The traffic flow improvement, again, is one of the things we hear from our citizens in our surveys, that traffic flow is really important to them. And so this would put the study together so we can do a better job in making sure our traffic flows. And then pavement management study is helping us to prioritize the quality of our pavement out there, so we know where we need to spend our dollars to make sure we can keep our assets in as good a shape as possible. And then the final one is the skid loader drop hammer concrete breaker, which is pretty significant for us to make sure we can safely and efficiently do the road patching that we do all around town. And relatively small expense, but I think we'll get a lot of value out of that purchase. So again, those are all proposed to be purchased through road use tax, and we're recommending that we do that, utilize that funding for those purchases. So with that, I think I will turn it over to Teresa. She's going to go over on a bigger picture where we are with the budget, what's proposed, and provide our recommendations to the city council.
Jim, before you do that, I did have one question about this document. It's on page 6, top of page 6, where it talks about the capital equipment program. So if the second sentence says funding for equipment purchases will come from road use tax fund, 492,000, water, wastewater, and general fund of 695,000. And the sentence above it says the preliminary budget includes spending 868,000. Well, if you add up those four numbers, it's way above 868,000. It's like 1 point some odd million. So those numbers don't.
The 868, maybe that's.
So anyway, we need to kind of double check those numbers.
And that's on the decision package memo, page 6, top. There's one paragraph at the top there.
Why am I not seeing that on page?
It's,
Oh, it's page 7 of the PDF. It's
Yeah.
Thank you.
You see what we're talking, Teresa?
I know exactly what he's talking about.
Okay.
Spreadsheet, I'll look at that. But do you care if I sit here while I look at my things? Suresh, Councilman Evans, is that okay with you? Can you see me? All right. First of all, I want to thank the Finance Council Committee for meeting several times and answering emails and phone calls and all weird hours of the day and weekend as we've worked through some of these issues. I had a pretty aggressive calendar this year, and I appreciated everyone helping me work through that. When I went to the committee here a couple weeks ago, I guess, I had taken with me a budget discussion document, and I had presented to the council what I considered to be a budget with a tax rate that, although increased the tax levy rate significantly, it would not affect a property owner in Johnston because of rollback. And I was not using reserve, general fund reserve, or local option sales tax to the ability that I could use it, because I'm very conservative and don't like to use reserves and don't like to use money that we have in the bank if I don't have to. The committee did ask me to go back and take a look at that. They asked all the departments to go back and take a look at their budgets to make sure that what they were asking for and what they were spending truly was legitimate and the things that they needed, and that if they were asking for a decision package, was there something in their budget that they could give up so that they could fund a decision package within that money. So everyone went back, we all talked about it. And then I put some pencil to paper a little bit longer and a few more hours worth, and came up with a budget that I presented to them, I believe, last week. And in particular, I guess, as your finance director, I had to become a little bit more comfortable with the recommendation I was going to make to you regarding the use of your local option sales tax money. And specifically, re-looked at the language for what the voters in Johnston said they would use the funds for local option sales tax, and legitimately was what I was going to recommend. Did it meet the letter of the language and the letter of the law in my eyes? And I came to accept the fact that it did. And I created a document that is, I believe, the fourth, that is exhibit in the memo that was called our exhibits. I think it was exhibit D. So it'd be the very last document, Cindy, I apologize, which is harder for you to read. But it's a reconciliation of the local option sales tax fund. And it's providing you, anyone, any in the public, anyone who asks, a record of the money we've received and what we've spent it on. And specifically, if you look at the fourth column, which is the 21-22 amended budget column, that's the year we're in right now. And in November, the city of Johnston received what is called a true-up payment, where the Department of Revenue goes back and looks at all of last fiscal year and determines that of the amount of local option sales tax they had estimated we would receive, the city of Johnston was owed an additional $1.3 million. So we received $1.3 million in November, which would go on top of the estimate they gave us, which was $3.9 million for this fiscal year. So I budgeted $2.2 million for fiscal year 22, where in reality, the estimate and what I amended, or what I can amend our budget to be, is that we're going to get about $5.28 million of local option sales tax money. So having said that, when I looked at the budget for FY '23, I thought, okay, we're going to get 3.9 million. That's our estimate for FY '22. That's not even counting the extra 1.3 that we got. So am I comfortable saying that I'm willing to spend 3.9 million in FY '23, knowing that I'm actually getting that in FY '22? And as your finance director, I am. Okay? And so if you look down at the second half or the bottom of the page where it talks about transfers out, it's telling you that I'm going to transfer of the money I'll have in the bank of local option sales tax. I'm not even necessarily counting on what I'm estimating for next year, but I plan on transferring about $2.5 million for debt service relief, which is what will get us to 233. We've been at 234 for 2 years. Get to 233 for this year. And then I'm recommending that we transfer for decision packages, and I have it laid out on the left-hand side of the paper, that for the fire department decision packages, it's 191,000. I don't have to read every line for you, but you can see where I'm saying parks, police, library, communication, for administration. And then I'm basically saying that last line item, which is general fund property tax relief, which in addition to property tax relief on the debt service side, I'm saying we're going to use additional lost money to provide property tax relief on our general levy to the total of $3.9 million in the budget that Jim and I are recommending in this 18-page memo. So that's the biggest picture of everything that pulls all of the budget together that I wanted to talk about based on page 18. So in the memo, the original big memo that I sent you, page 18 at the top of the page talks about the fact that the preliminary property tax levy goes to 1068, so it's not exactly the same as last year's levy, but Jim laid out on the dais up there for you a sheet that looks like this, what it has an effect on the property, on the home, property home. So if you had a property home assessed at 100,000 last year and this year, your property tax, even though the rate goes up 8 cents, your property tax actually goes down $21.85 for the year. All right. So that's the first bullet point. That also still leaves me a general fund reserve of 25%, which was exhibit item A. I know I'm having Cindy jump around. I kind of feel like the engineers now that get to tell you to go from page to page. They do that all the time. So in the on exhibit A, that's the sheet I give you every year that other way. There you go. Keep going. There. So at the bottom of that page, you'll see a 25% for the general fund line, which is the O&O, the first line. And it still actually leaves for the overall, the whole general fund, a levy, a reserve of 30%. Because within the general fund, I have the general operating fund, and then I have these sub-funds, hotel, motel, equipment replacement, building budget reserve. But the one that I have to operate from July, August, and September to pay salaries and things like that is that first line item, O&O. That's the one I need the 25% in because I don't have any property tax dollars coming in. So with this new rate, that still leaves me at 25%. The anticipated overall property tax dollars is the other copy that Jim laid on the dais in front of you. It's 10 years worth of history, and it tells you what our taxable valuation growth was on the far column. And then the column right next to you tells you the property tax dollars, not the levy rate, but the dollars we collected. And you'll see that the budget I'm proposing says we will collect 1.61% more dollars. and our valuation grew 3.76%. You might want to consider even maybe making that a little bit more. That's up to you guys. I'm just saying that's where we're at with the dollar figure. The 1068 has the 1 cent decrease in debt service. It keeps the general fund levy the same, and the increase is in our benefit levy, 7884, which is health insurance. All right, that's where that little increase is at, that 5 cents. One of the issues that I mentioned this morning in a meeting, and I totally lost my council persons that were there, had to do with the property valuation growth. And, you know, ours grew 3.76. Last year, we only grew 3.28. You know, these weren't very big years, and I was getting a lot of data from some other cities, and I was trying to figure out how they were all keeping the same levy rate and getting more money, 4%, 5%, 7%, 10%. So I reached out to some of them after our meeting this morning, and prime example, Pleasant Hill, which I really didn't understand that one, how they could be getting, I believe what did they tell me? Their max levy rate was going to be $7.41%, and they're not changing their levy. And I'm like, how are you doing that? We're raising ours 5 cents and only gaining 0.98% on our max levy issue. So how are they doing that by not gaining it? Apparently, in Pleasant Hill, there's a huge Mid-American something and a Magellan area or plant. And so something happened in the gas and utility area of reassessments last year. They've had their attorneys double check it. Their actual 100% valuation grew 53%.
Wow.
Or 53 million. Wasn't it a big, huge,
They're not reducing the levy.
huge number, huge number. And so sometimes when I check with other cities, you know, I get kind of, you know, I like to give you that information thinking we usually, because we look cool. This time I was checking, I was like, what number am I doing wrong, you know? But here we are at 0.98% on the maximum tax levy notice that we have to put out, which is really the maximum tax, property tax dollars. And so if we're over that 2%, our number's grown over 2%, we have to say why. And ours would be 0.98% right now, because that part's the only part that changed. And West Des Moines is going to be at 4.74, Ankeny 7.95, Indianola 3.45, Waukee 18.48, Norwalk 7.4, Des Moines 4.5, Altoona 10.43, Pleasant Hill 7.41, and Windsor Heights is going to be a negative 0.06%.
And what
they're
are those
lowering,
numbers again, Teresa?
they're lowering their levy 71 cents in Windsor Heights.
What are those numbers again?
What is it equaling?
What are you describing there?
You know,
when you're comparing these numbers.
The notice we have to put in the
Right.
paper, that is your maximum property tax dollar levy figure.
So it's the equivalent to the 0.98 on this chart.
Yeah.
And if we were to go over that, that's where we'd have a special meeting.
Well, not a special meeting, but you have to have a supermajority of the council
Supermajority.
approve that.
And we did that last year.
We've always been over it.
Yeah, right.
The last 2 years or whatever. But when I was seeing all those numbers this weekend, I was like, are you guys talking the rate or the dollar, or what's the difference? And so there's just always lots of just different things that happen in communities that I was trying to wrap my head around a little bit. But overall, I think the budget as we have proposed it here for you should be something you're very proud of. We're giving a lot of decision packages to department heads that are requesting. We are keeping a reserve, although I'd love for the reserve to be 30 and 35, but I know I'll never get that. So,
Well, Teresa, can I just ask you a real quick question?
Yeah,
about-
absolutely.
As you have, because you have these, at least you had up before.
which one do you want up there?
The accounts, reserve accounts.
That's this one.
It's one up there, yeah.
Yeah, so that does, so, and then if you look at the local option sales tax document, so for instance, we ended the 21-22 with an ending balance of 3.8 million. So
That's not in the general fund. It's a special
That,
revenue.
that's
fund.
just, I just wanted, so in essence, so we had 5.7 million, but really, we also have another 3.8 million on top of, I don't know, well, it is a money that we have in our bank account.
Oh, yes, we have 70 million in our bank.
Well, okay, I mean, I mean, so anyway, I realized that, I knew when I made that comparison. you're
But
not gonna be-
it's that local
The teacher
option
was
sales
gonna
tax
do it.
can only be, a special revenue fund, because it can only be.
No, right, exactly.
spent for a special thing.
Although we have a pretty broad definition of how we can use it.
Apparently ours is the tightest that there is in the metro.
That's
we
that's
have
like
learned
saying
that.
I'm the
We
most
have
shaped
learned that
person in
as
my
well.
family.
Hmm.
We did a great job writing that language.
Yeah, I wouldn't change a word of it.
No.
I will say no one has ever asked me about the language though. And I remember how many times it got edited.
We did, yeah, we spent a lot of time on it.
Teresa, can I ask a question, though? You do propose a significant amount of decision packages based off of that local option sales tax. Was there any evaluation of using, especially for some of the one-time, do any of them qualify, or would they qualify under the Recovery Act funding? Because we have a lot more latitude in that local option sales tax that we maybe don't have within the wording of Recovery Act?
The recovery funds, sorry, Cindy. For the recovery funds, I wish I could find my email. I just put it on my poster, or put it on my board so I could tell you. But of the $3 million, $3 million some odd dollars we're getting for ARPA funds, you've committed to about 1.5 million for segment A of the sewer. We've committed for some software and another mental health component for a department. And then I'm going to strongly be recommending for you, although it's in next year's CEP, that due to the contract with Polk County Communications and the fact that we'll be renewing that communication agreement with them, and with coming with that will also be the recommendation that all public safety and communication pieces of equipment be replaced in the city. That's $818,000, and that would pretty much wipe out our equipment replacement fund. That'll have a balance of 875. And so when I attended, the final rules have been issued, and I attended that webinar. That is absolutely exactly what they want things like that spent on, public safety, things like that. So it's an approved ARPA fund. So it would be my recommendation when we start talking about that next fall, that's what I was going to say with that money. And that left us about, do either of you chiefs remember what I said was left then? About 800,000, maybe more, 600,000 in my email. So there's a little bit left for some infrastructure projects or something. So I was kind of staying away from using ARPA funds for any decision packages, to be honest with you.
I thought that we had a little bit of ARPA funding into the Trestle Bridge.
Hotel motel tax, or
Local option sales tax in the
Okay.
current year.
All right, I got it confused. Thank you.
this year. Okay, that's what we would have left after those things I just told you about. So we'll still have 870 some thousand. So,
In ARPA funds?
yes.
Okay.
So you may be, and we have till 2026 to spend those. So
Sure.
there may be decision packages in a year or two
Okay.
that you decide you want to spend that on. Since we had a substantial true up this past year, I felt comfortable using the local option sales tax.
Okay. You know, there's a couple of one-time items that, and then we have a couple of other entities that either held where they were, and so you could do some shifting, and I might suggest that.
Any other questions for Teresa or Jim on what they're proposing for the budget?
Well, is the presentation complete? Have we gone through?
Well,
everything?
I guess the other thing was then we did, I'm sorry, I forgot to say that we are wanting to increase that contribution to the Des Moines Partnership from $5,590 to the $7,500. So, I mean, our recommendations were at the bottom of page 18, which was to approve this operating budget as I have presented, to approve it with a tax rate of 1068, to fund the decision packages as we have talked about, and to keep our reserve where we're at, and then to do the Des Moines Partnership. Those are my recommendations for the regular budget. Jim has sent you a separate email about some other items that he wanted to just discuss with you that are not in the budget and that are not in my recommendation at this point. But that's my budget recommendation of what I'd like to put together for the state and for my notices and things.
So Teresa, remind us what the process is going forward.
Okay, so the process going forward is that we have to set a public hearing and then have the max levy, max property tax dollar public hearing, set another hearing for a regular budget, and then hold that hearing for the regular budget. So we would start all of that in February, setting, holding, setting, holding, setting. I mean, 4 times, whatever. In the middle of, and in between time, Adam is working, I thought maybe he was here, but he's working with our bond counsel and completing the amendment to our urban renewal agreement, which has to be completed so that we can pass our pre-levy resolutions, which all have to be done in a certain order. We'll have to do all of those, and you have to pass those before you pass the budget. So when those meetings happen, we'll have, you know, kind of a checklist.
Teresa, if I'm recalling correctly, for every penny we add to the levy, it's $15,000.
Correct,
So 5 cents equates to $75,000.
that's correct.
If we wanted to keep the levy the same as it was current year, we have to figure out some place to cut $75,000, correct? Okay, thank you.
Teresa, do you somewhere in your document, one of these documents that talks about the hotel motel tax and our ending balance in that? I remember seeing it was projected to be 290,000. And you broke out one of these documents, it breaks out how we intend to spend that. And as I recall, looking through the documents, we allocate money to Jedco out of there, a few other things, have 81,000 for trails improvements, and there's about 30,000 or so in our unspent balance based on a projection of 290,000 receipts for this year. Is that?
And that, Cindy, what page is that?
Well, PDF page 11, I don't know.
Yeah. So, it was also part of one of my budget talking points, but we currently pay Jedco, the Johnston Chamber, and the Greater Des Moines Partnership requests with hotel motel funds. And we annually transfer $81,000 to the Parks and Trails Fund, and we budget $2,500 for city logo clothing. The ending balance on June 30, 21, which was just audited, was $70,487. And I'm anticipating the ending balance to be $36,611 on June 30 of 22, because our revenue just keeps going down. So I think that in this year's budget, then Jim has increased, hoping that things have turned around. We've kind of increased our estimate of our hotel motel tax revenue, but then that increases our additional sevenths or 2/7 that we pay to Bravo and Greater Des Moines, because they get 2/7 and 2/7, and then we keep 2/7.
Right, so you got to back those 4 cents out, and then, but then you have the JEDCO and so, but I just, at the end of the day, as I remember looking at the budget book, in that account, there was about for that, 290,000 is projected income for FY '23 with a projected unspent ending balance of 30,000, is that correct?
That's correct. And then just a couple other points, Councilman Martin. One of the reasons I at least increased the property tax rate a little bit this year is because we know that in next fiscal year, we're going to lose another $102,000 of backfill money. We're going to have to start budgeting about $320,000 a year for our use agreement with Ignite. That normally would be general fund dollars. The loss of the backfill would be general fund dollars. And then the agreement with Polk County is next year, where we have to start paying for our communication agreement with Polk County, which is going to be another $100,000. So we've got about $400,000 worth of increased expense we know is going to happen to us next year, and an additional loss of $104,000 we know right off the top. So I am of the mindset that we need to start at least increasing it a little bit, if not to what I'd originally proposed to the council, which was up to 1108, and then it didn't affect the property owner. And I was firmly told that no.
So the original proposal would have funded no decision packages.
Yeah.
None of the decision packages, and would have had a 44-cent property tax levy increase. And so that's why I'm fully supportive. We'll talk maybe a little bit later when we get to that point about some adjustments I'd like to see made, but I'm fully supportive of the $10.68 levy that's being proposed. When you look at, I'm not sure it's in this document, but if you look at all the money that we're using with local option sales tax to offset the property tax rate, our property tax rate would be like $12.83.
That's at the
without
bottom
loss.
of that
So
lost document.
we're well beyond the dollar reduction in property. We're like above $2. And the levy historically has jumped around. When I first started serving on the council, it was $11.09, and then it would go up and it would go down based on other factors. So I don't feel like we have to, from my perspective, and everybody can have their own perspective, but from my perspective, I don't think we have to peg ourselves to an exact levy dollar number. So,
Well, I agree with a lot of what you said there. As I recall, a couple of years ago, we talked about how other cities were keeping their levies down. And there was some special tax levies that Ankeny was doing. Do you recall when we did that study?
They have a franchise fee that they charge.
Franchise fees, that's right.
They're not charging local option sales tax. So,
Is electric and gas utility, correct?
yeah.
And they might not, but there might have been some other cities that were doing something like that. And I agree that's just moving taxes around. But we all know that we get this reputation of being an expensive city to live in, although we have really high quality benefits to living here. But then people do look at other cities and look at those taxes, but they don't see those franchise fees. So I'm just thinking, that's all, talking.
Well, and I gave you the document that showed you we're not the most expensive city. That was one of the, didn't I put that as an exhibit? C?
No, I understand. It's
Okay.
always word of mouth.
Okay,
It is,
all
right.
it doesn't matter, facts don't matter,
I know, okay.
you can print the chart, but if you ask the person on the street, Johnston's is an expensive place to live, so.
We can hold on. I think we need to have more conversation.
Any other questions for Teresa or Jim regarding the budget? Any comments?
Well, are we,
I think we're at the point where if you want to weigh in and give us your thoughts on it, that would be great.
okay. Well, first of all, I think Teresa and the whole staff deserve a ton of credit, because as I mentioned earlier, 44 cents was originally what we were having to look at. And a lot of these are things that are completely out of the control of the city of Johnston. The $260,000 impact because of the rollback, that's not a city of Johnston policy, that's a state law that impacts, that we lost, so we lost that in revenue. The phase out of the rollback, phase out of the backfill, another 105,000. So if you add those two together, that's $365,000. If you divide it by the 15 cents, that's 24-cent increase in levy right there. From those lost property tax dollars because of decisions that are completely outside of our hands. And also that doesn't include impact of higher insurance rates. Again, those are not decisions where we're giving employees pay raises or we're hiring more people. These are just things that are completely out of our hands. So this is a very challenging budget environment. And I think this budget really responsibly kind of puts that together. The other thing I think it does is it provides a really good balance between using local option sales tax dollars, and at the same time, it does have I think a responsible adjustment to the levy, and also keeps the reserve at 25%. And as much as we'd like to have, I will guarantee you that when the fiscal year ends at the end of on June 30, 2024, or whenever 2023, there will be more than 25% in the reserve. And because if you look at this document, we ended 2 years ago with 40% in the reserve, even though we budgeted 25%. The year after that, it was 32%. We always end up with more money in the reserve. You can pretty much be, I think, respect that. And I think the third thing though too is, I know when we first had this first discussion, it was like, okay, a 44-cent increase in levy and not funding any decision packages. And I think all of us look at all of these departments that we have out here. And if you look at last year's budget, we were only able to fund the decision packages that really related to public safety. We were able to fund the police department and the fire department, and we were able to fund communications department. But there's so many other parts of our city government that didn't receive any of the decision packages last year. And I think this year's budget really does a really good job of funding the parks department, 2 new staff people there. Economic development, another staff person there, and the library, increases that they need. Those are all things that our residents use. And I think it's really a very balanced budget. It's not too top heavy in one area. It still funds a lot of public safety needs that they need too. So I really support, I think that I will support this framework of a budget. That said, two things that I would like to see us, 2 or 3 things that I've kind of noted. One, and we haven't talked about it yet, I do believe that we should look at tapping into this, some of our unspent hotel motel tax for funding some sort of part of the airport ask. If you look at the airport ask for us, they've asked for us for $30 per capita, but they've asked other cities for $10 per capita. No real rhyme or reason for why they're asking that. Grimes, they asked, I think, $10 per capita. Windsor Heights is a heck of a lot closer to the airport than we are, $10 per person. I think we could make an approach where instead of on the $30 per capita, we could do $10 per capita, which would cut their ask of us from $677,000 down to $225,000. And it's also got to be completely 100% contingent on whether the state actually provides its money. If the state doesn't provide any money, we shouldn't provide any money. But I do believe that the airport it's a regional entity. 2, the city of Johnston has 100% batting average of supporting regional entities throughout whenever we've been asked to participate and support regional entities. We're supporting the air blower item in this budget, which all the fire departments ask. I think that's great. We support all the other regional entities, whether it's Bravo or DART or our Convention and Visitors Bureau, with way more money than's being asked for. And the airport is used by a lot of Johnston businesses and a lot of residents. In this document, it talks about all the people who come and visit Corteva. A lot of those people fly in, and for us to be able to be competitive to lure more businesses to Johnston, we're going to need a first-rate airport. So I'd like us to look at coming back at a lower rate. on the airport. Again, 100% contingent on whether the state actually participates, and fund that fund it over a longer period of time. I think you could fund a third of that. You could fund, instead of funding it at $677,000, you could do $10 per capita, works out to about $225,000. Spread that over 10 years instead of the 4 years they're asking for. Every city that so far has told them that they're going to provide funding spreads it out over more years. Ankeny is saying 6 years, not 4 years. We could go back to them and say, let's do it over 10 years at $22,000 a year. That we could tap into that money that we have in the hotel motel reserve. We know with different projects we got coming online, we're going to definitely have more hotel motel revenue online. So I would really strongly like to see us fund a modified airport ask. Second of all, I would like to, out of the ask that Chief McDaniel made to allow to have 33 officers and funded at 32 sworn, I would like to support that as well. I think that's something we've done in the past, makes a lot of sense, and so I would support that as well. And third, we have an ask here that I don't know if we're going to talk about it or not, from the Mid-Iowa. It's to create a council of government here in Metro Iowa, here among Metro governments in Boone, Dallas, Jasper, Marion, Polk, Story, and Warren counties. It's a $4,000 ask. One of the reasons I like this is that we do a lot of regional stuff today, but it's all within the Des Moines Metro. And we don't do a lot of things with a lot of organizations outside of, like in the Dallas County. I think, Ronnie, you serve on the Beaver Creek Watershed Management Authority. And so many of those types of issues are impacted by people who are way up outside of Polk County. And so, while I think we wouldn't get a lot of benefit for this $4,500, I think it is an opportunity for us to develop relationships with people outside of that area. So those are three things that I'm going to continue to want to fight for and push for as we continue this discussion.
I apologize, but I know that we need to have more discussion about the budget and about some of the other items that we haven't gotten to tonight. We do have guests here this evening. We do have people dialing in for the reason why the guests are here. And so I think we're going to have to bring the council work session to a close at 7 o'clock, and then we can pick this up again at the end of the regular council meeting. Is that all right?
Sure, yes.
Okay. Sorry to have to do that, but I think under the circumstances, we need to do that. So why don't we adjourn the work session, and we'll come back here momentarily and open up the regular city council meeting.